Okay, so in this video we're going to be talking about Learning Outcome 5 as part of the OCR Level 3 IT Cambridge Technicals. The next one, so what we're going to do is we're going to talk about these topics. These are all on the spec. So the first one is going to be ethical issues. Second one is operational issues. Third one, threats. Fourth one, physical security. And the last one, which is digital security. Further on from that, we're going to be talking a little bit about the safe disposal of data and computer equipment. Okay, so ethical issues. So ethical issues are basically where it isn't against the law to do a certain thing, but ethically it may be frowned upon. So a prime example of ethics is basically if someone believes in using the correct manners compared to someone who doesn't. To use the correct manners is not the law, but it is ethically correct and ethically nice to use correct manners when you are out and socialising. So here's the main differences between ethics and law within computing. So we've got there ethics at the top. It says as a guideline to come. It's more of a guideline to a computer user compared to when it is a rule or it's a law. Okay, so you must abide by the Computer Misuse Act, you must abide by the Data Protection Act. Okay, so these are the kind of laws that will obviously, and if you break these laws, you can get incriminated for stuff like leaking data security, loads of different things that you can do. So there is a couple of little different things in terms of the differences between ethics and law inside of IT. So the next one that we're going to go through is something called whistleblowing. Okay, so whistleblowing is basically when an employee discloses that some form of serious unlawful practice is taking place in their workplace. So in other words, a employee has found one of their colleagues to have been breaking the law. Okay, this is called a whistleblower. Now, potentially this is going to get the other person into trouble. But it is ethically correct to whistleblow to make sure that everyone is safe and secure in the workplace. So, disability, gender and sexuality discrimination. Now this was called the Equality Act, and this is a law that is it gives equal treatment to a load of different people from different colours, races, disabilities or gender. So a prime example of this will be there's still a gender pay gap within the UK. It is slowly shrinking, but at the moment stereotypically in the same kind of jobs men will get paid more than women, but that is slowly, and I use the word slowly loosely, it is slowly coming back online with each other. Okay, the next one says the use of information. So this is a law that is basically protected by the Data Protection Act. And there's 8 principles in the Data Protection Act and you'll be able to read up on them. But basically this ensures that personal data is used responsibly. Prime example of where the Data Protection Act will be used is, say, within school. We use Sims and we have got a username and password, and only teachers are allowed to use Sims. Members of staff, students are not allowed to use Sims because they'll be able to get each other's pieces of data and potentially they might be able to use that data in an incriminating way. Okay, codes of practice. So within the workplace, there is always an ethical guidance to the code of practice, and this is basically where we start using sort of like systems, and we use them within boundaries, and the boundaries are preset using a code of practice within a sort of working environment. Prime example of a code of practice where we would use it in school is just before you log in, you've got to accept a user's acceptability users policy. This is there as a code of practice for you to make sure that you don't do anything incriminating on the computers. Okay, operational issues. Okay, so these cover a wide range of circumstances, and like it says there, that could jeopardize individual departments or the entire organization. So these are the kind of issues that might crop up. Okay, so security of information. So failure to protect information from loss, corruption, illegal duplication, or being stolen, manipulated, or hacked. Okay, so how could this really affect a business? Okay, so it's loss of business. People might not trust that company to hold their pieces of information. Bankruptcy. So bankruptcy might be where people stop spending money, and then with them means then they're not going to have enough money to keep the business going and pay the bills. Fines or court cases. So that is if someone decides to take someone to court. Prime example, there was I think it was last year or the year before, British Airways, they had a security breach on a lot of personal data of their customers, and potentially they would have got fined or even court cases from the customers whose data got stolen. Okay. Okay, so here's just a couple of little questions just to start thinking about. So, in an ever-growing IT reliant world, why is data such an important aspect? So, why do we need to keep it safe? Okay, so now these are the main things. All right. So, for instance, what can happen to a business if they fail to keep their employee customer safe in the workplace? Okay. So this could affect. These could all reflect badly on a business. So if the company didn't look after their employees, didn't look after their building, it didn't really think about anything to do with health and safety, then it would actually be quite damaging to that business itself. Okay. And these could lead to compensation, court cases, and imprisonment. That's obviously if it gets really, really serious. Okay, so that we're disaster and recovery planning. So when a business is first set up, they should create a contingency plan that covers all possibilities. Now, a contingency plan or disaster recovery is basically if a member of staff is working and say a flood happens or say a tornado hits or something like that, and the building falls down or IT equipment gets damaged, how can they actually plan to get all the data back that they might have lost within that? So these are stuff like data backups. Now normally backups are done, you can either do them off-site, so you back them up to an external server or cloud storage off-site. These can also, like it says there, we can have physical copies of company data, so we can back it up onto external hard drives, all them kind of things. And there it says fireproof doors for server rooms, so if there was a fire in the building, it wouldn't actually breach the actual server room. Okay. So organisational policies, so there's loads of different policies that you will have to abide by within the workplace. First one is behaviour in the workplace. Second one there is acceptable use policies. And the third one is code of conducts. Okay, now these acceptable use policies, these state what you can and can't do on PCs. Okay, now it might be a case of you are not allowed to log into social media, for instance. If you're found on social media, then that could be an instant sort of a second offence, depending on what that policy is of that business. Okay, so change drivers. So change drivers, these things that must change basically, such as new government legislation and new entrants into the market, all these kind of things. Now, these need to these drivers, these sort of change drivers, these are as the world of IT is growing and changing for the better. But with it being changing, we obviously need to then make sure we are protected. So for instance here, Spotify and Apple Music. Spotify went live 9 years ago, before Apple Music, which then was a new entrant to the music streaming service. So you need to make sure that there is specific sort of elements of change within the IT to make sure that we can grow, we can create new businesses, we can create more jobs, all them kind of things. Okay, so there's loads of different things that you think about. So start thinking about new technology, making old tech redundant. So these are big changes, you know. Years and years ago, you wouldn't have thought of having a touchscreen computer, but now there are touchscreen computers around. You wouldn't have actually thought that there's going to be, Face ID, for instance, who Apple use. You would never really have thought that. So these are all the pieces of information that we've got to make sure that we are safe and secure using, and as it goes, then obviously the laws and the ethics can all change. And there where it says the scale of change, so this reflects the needs of the business. So for instance, if you wanted to replace slow technology, prime example is using a new fibre optic system. So for instance, using a better internet connection, which will then mean that the business is going to run much quicker. Okay, so we're going to now start talking a bit about threats to data to businesses. But the first one here that we're going to look through is logical protection. Now the first one is going to be password characteristics. You will all know this. Basically, what makes a good password? Mixture of uppercase and lowercase, between 6 to 18, I should say, characters long. Must include numbers and symbols, including special characters as well, so you can use stuff like, percentages, dollar signs, all them kind of things. Main purpose is to make sure that nobody can actually guess your password. The stronger the password, harder it is for criminals to try and guess it. Okay, so token authentication. This is basically, after entering username and password, you can generate a token. So basically you don't have to enter your details again. Now this token authentication, you need to make sure that your username and password is specific and it is hard to guess. But then when it's done, the token authentication will be downloaded as like a little cookie on your area. So that means you will then be able to log in without putting your password in every time. The next one, which is obviously emerging measures, so these should be put in place to protect business data and customers safe online. Okay, so stuff like password policies, control access firewalls. That's a really good one. Security software, update programs. Make sure everything that you're using is completely up to date. And this is basically to protect business and customer data. The next one that we've got is access rights and permissions. Okay, so these are permissions that people can actually do to make sure that nothing really gets stolen. Okay, so for instance, here we've got read, write, and having the ability to erase files. Prime example in school is the teachers have different permissions to students. So for instance, I can see all the documents and I can edit all the documents, whereas if you open up a curriculum shared drive, you cannot edit anything inside of there. You can only access it and read it. Okay, so real-time scanning for viruses. This is basically on the network. We will have a virus checker, and it'll check every sort of couple of minutes. It'll check to make sure that all the computers that are getting used are virus-free. Okay, so it says they're using access credentials and entering a software supplier code to access files. This is basically two-factor authentication. So basically, if you decide to log into a website, they might actually send you an email with a code on it, and that code then is going to have to get entered correctly for then you to get access to that website. Okay, so antivirus software, as you can see the picture there, there's loads of them. There's loads of different pieces of software, and these are just basically little scanners that will scan to make sure that the computer is running to the best it possibly can. If it does find the virus, it will then delete it. Okay, so we've already done a little bit on authentication. So this is, understand the process of identifying an individual. I'm making sure that these are usually based on usernames and passwords. So if you haven't got the correct username and password, you are not going to get entrance to either that computer system or that website or that database, whatever you're trying to find. Okay, so firewalls basically, these are designed to make sure that there's no unauthorized access to or from a private network. So in school, we will have a firewall that if you are going to access a website that might be quite damaging to the school, then what will happen is you'll just get blocked out straight away. On the other side, if that website tries to get access to our data, it will then get blocked out straight away as well. So it's like a big brick wall in between us and the internet. Secure backups of data. So if we were to back up some piece of information, then all we do is we just back it up onto, say, OneDrive or Google Drive or them kind of things, just so it was external to the school. This would then be secure using a username and password. And this would allow us, if there was a disaster in the school, to still have the data and still have access to that data. Okay, so we've already went through this, access rights. This is based on whoever is trying to get access to it. So if you, as a student, is trying to get access to a staff drive, you cannot get access to it because of your credentials. Whereas me, as a member of staff, I can log in and I can see your work, so I can then mark it. Okay, so physical protections. Now these might seem pretty basic, but it's just something that you need to know. So biometrics. That word biometrics basically means using our body in some way to basically identify ourselves. Stuff like fingerprints, facial recognition, iris scanners, voice recognition, loads of different things. Prime example, an iPhone. So an iPhone uses fingerprints and facial ID. It also uses voice recognition when you say the words, "Hey Siri." I hope my phone doesn't start now. This is just basically just to make sure that you can prove that you are the identified person to use that database or to use that phone or to use that computer system, whatever you're trying to get onto. Next one is locked doors. So this is understanding if you're going to put a computer in a room, just put a lock on the door. Simple as. Whether it's going to be with a card, fingerprints, like an access code, even a key. That's a real pretty basic level in terms of how to secure your data. Okay, so device locks. So this is stuff like using passwords on iPhones and stuff. This is all to secure data on there. Okay, so RFID. So RFID, these like small like little chips inside of, say, ID cards, for instance. Now these will gain access to certain parts of the school. Prime example, all staff badges in school, we have got access to the doors, so we can gain access to anywhere the lifts, all them kind of things. Students won't have access to that, and that goes back to the user access levels. Okay, so disabling USB ports to ensure no media can be used. And this is basically to make sure that no one can put any viruses onto the network. So if I wanted to, say, harm the school, I could potentially take a USB stick with a virus, plug it in, and harm the data, harm the school and their network and their service.